I was taught to pray at these places that are on the east coast of Delaware. I went out into the water, turned around to walk to shore, and stepped on the first one. This valuable gemstone shouldn't be laying right there on the beach. This one specific one is the only one that has serpentinite and the amount of artifacts that it has. So it says that it's might be the center of whatever ancient civilization was living on the eastern seaboard. We went to the university to verify artifact shapes that it looked like it was worked by humans. And so that's right then where they kind of just put the ball in my court and said, it's up to you. You got to figure this out.
Hey, I'm Shay Allen, and I am so excited to be bringing you this next story. This is a gentleman who has found evidence of ancient indigenous peoples with an advanced technology at sites up and down the east coast of North America. Hi, Charles. Thanks for being here. You're a
Well,
advocational archaeologist. Is that right?
oh, yeah, avocational, like
Yes.
vocational school. So avocational archaeologist. Yep.
And that generally means that you're unfunded by universities and other systems that might want to
Well,
adjust your findings, right?
it's that they go to school to get a degree, and an avocational archaeologist is specifically somebody that does, you don't have to have a degree to be an avocational archaeologist. Doesn't mean that you're a pseudo archaeologist, just means that you did not go to formal schooling to get that degree. And yeah, for me, what that does is allows me all the permissions to study all of the different schools of thought rather than a specific university or academic institution that I was trained by, because they really do dictate your paradigm, how you see it. And yeah, I operate free of all that.
Awesome. So, my understanding is you have discovered evidence of pre colonial civilizations that had an advanced technology, and you found these sites all up and down the East Coast.
That's correct.
So, tell us
Yes.
about that. Tell us about, I know you've got a piece of the serpent stone there with you, right?
Yes, we have, and I do have that smaller turtleback with me today, but this is one of the serpent fetishes. And I did bring my little light today so we don't break the cameras. But this shows you that that is a translucent piece of gemstone. It's translucent green.
Right.
And this one's one of the easier ones to identify. You can see the eye obviously up there. And
Yeah.
it's pure serpentinite. That's of the many sites that are up and down the East Coast from Canada to Florida. This one specific one is the only one that has serpentinite and the amount of artifacts that it has. So it says that it's might be the center of whatever ancient civilization was living on the eastern seaboard.
And where is this site that you found where you found the serpent stone? Kind of walk us through how you came across your first site and then how that opened the door into other research.
Well, yeah, I was taught to pray at these places that are on the east coast of Delaware, South Bowers Beach and Bennett's Pier Beach and Big Stone Beach and Port Mahon and some places in Delaware City, and had lost both my mother and father. Just gave away a $5.5 million estate because my family was going to eat me alive over it. I went out into the water, the way I was taught, just stand in the water out there at the port to cry with my mother, and kind of accepting my new life because I just gave up everything I worked for and turned around to walk to shore and stepped on the first one. And when I took that to the University of Delaware in the state of Delaware, they immediately pointed out that there is no such thing as a rock or a stone from Kent County, Delaware, because you live on a coastal plain, and that we needed to figure out where that, because valuable gemstones shouldn't be laying right there on the beach. And that it was, that we went to the university to verify artifact shapes that it looked like it was worked by humans. And so that's right then where they kind of just put the ball in my court and said, it's up to you. You got to figure this out.
So I know you've then worked with, and we talked at length about this because I found evidence of these same civilizations when I was doing traveling in the Gulf Coast of Florida. These are canal systems, these are shell mittens, these are earthen mounds. Talk about the evidence that then finding this artifact started to lead you, that road it led you down.
Well, that way it gives your viewers confidence that they understand they're listening to something very unique and that they are on the breaking edge of a wave of truth in regards to all of this. Because when I went to the universities and academic institutions and started to point out what I had, a lot of them are very arrogant, and they came out and said, well, Charles, And I took this at the beginning, I took it personal. And then I realized they were just teaching me how to beat them. They came out and said, Charles, if you had evidence of civilization, what you would have is thousands or at least hundreds of barrow mounds or midden mounds that are the refuse mounds that you would find in regards to large groups of people. And so, as we're going to be sharing with you soon, you get, unlike the Netherlands, they're sharing the same thing right now, these refuse barrows that mark ancient civilization sites, to where in just in the state of Delaware, we have now and counting over 80,000 new barrow mounds to introduce. And so to make it
You said 80,000?
Proto-Mesopotamia, over 80,000 just in Delaware. And so the canals and the mounds you see together, that gives you evidence of irrigation. They have a well system. They had aquaculture because oysters lined all of these canals. It shows that they were a civilization by anybody in the world standards, and that it's sprawling. It goes all up and down the East Coast.
It kind of sounds like you're talking about Atlantis.
Well, yeah, and I do a lot of reading of cuneiform script. I do that every day. I read at least a couple hundred pages of that every day. And when you go back and you look at our whole world, the whole religious world, the Bible, both versions of the Bible, everything that we fight each other over today, all comes from Mesopotamia, what they used to call the root, of humanity, the cradle of humanity. But when you read it in actual ancient text, it tells you that they came from a previous culture. It says that they came to there. And so, if you think about it, at that point, even during colonial times, what other point on earth, what other place on earth was still supposedly unknown where that society or civilization would have came from? And that's North America. So all of these canals, all of these middens, the refuse that are in them, the shells, and the soil data date it back to, our soil data is 20,000 BCE to 8,000 BCE, which means the normal frame of reference for history in our lives that we were taught.
Which is
But
6,000
we are
years. That's all
at
we get.
least, yeah, blew right by all of that.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That's incredible. So I want to get back to the stone that you found, this stone, and this idea that I felt this as I was looking and traveling along the Florida coast, because I found shell middens, mounds. A lot of these properties and sites are isolated within military bases, federal lands, or they've been covered over, right, with infrastructure. Or, I know you can see a lot of the patterns in the road systems in the cities. These were actually the ancient canals, things like this. But this stone, you're telling me, this knowing that we have when we go to these places, it's actually coming from the stone, because the stone it holds information. Talk about that.
Well, here in this case, you offer a sign. That's what the lab is so fascinated by. The independent laboratory that verifies our things is how unique this is, because for those of us that are looking for some type of physical confirmation of things that we feel, okay, here I'm telling you that each of these artifacts, there's another smaller one to show you how pure they are. Watch. That's pure gemstone. You see, that's a little single beam light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, pure gemstone. That is
Looks like a
magnesium.
microchip.
Yes, well, and that's exactly, it's a silicate. So it's pure, but the same mineral construction as is what the memory chip that's in the device that you're using to watch us. And so here in ancient civilization, left behind an extremely large amount, we have some pieces that are as large as Harley Davidson's,
Mm-hmm.
worked pieces that these humans left. It is a memory chip construction. So it is a silicate, just like a memory chip. And
Wow.
most of the stones have their own living magnetic field that you could measure with a cell phone app. So it appears as if they left us a message in something that we're just starting to learn how to use to record messages with.
So to clarify, you're saying that these artifacts put off an EMF signal, and I've got an EMF app on my phone. I use it.
Yes.
You're saying that you can pick up these signals from these sites using your phone.
Well, yeah, not only if you walk there and you get a more powerful meter like some of the ghost hunter type people use, that'll be astounding to them, because when you go across and you walk across certain beaches and or in this case midden mounds or cemetery mounds without any disturbance, you see we're unlocking a new way to verify ancient civilization, because now using devices or airplanes, you could fly over, see these magnetic fields that we feel when we walk into the place, because they tell us if it's a ghost, You think you got a ghost, they say, check and make sure you don't have high EMF. So they're telling you that that's how other dimensions communicate with us. And when you go to these places, specifically this place, the power of where you're standing is overwhelming. If you go there, you'll see people that go there. If you ask them their stories, you will hear the most profound stories of why they just go there to pray. So it's if you see some of us just have this genetic connection to feeling things like this. And this gives you a confirmation because we're going to record that video for you today so that you have it to share as you wish to share with anyone. That you see that living magnetic field. It's in a giant 220-pound gemstone memory chip so that we wouldn't miss it. And you'll see the pulsing nature of the signal. What is it trying to say? Because your memory chip in your phone, as I said, is the exact same thing, except for on a much smaller scale.
Right. So essentially, we're talking about an ancient civilization that left behind memory chips to tell us the story that's been lost of the truth of our origins. We're talking about resources as well. So these are verifiable sources of information via these artifacts, via these sites. On top of that, we have my favorite website that you and I got excited about yesterday, the Library of Congress. And you talked to me about this William Penn document, that there's actual written firsthand evidence in our historical record, in our Library of Congress, that verifies these accounts.
Yes. And your listeners should help boost you up and make you go viral over just this because in 1685, William Penn, this is one of the largest landowners in the history of America. That's why he's important. And if you live up in PA, East Coast, you know all about him. But if you don't, that way you just check into him. William Penn wrote a letter in 1685 to the Free Traders of London. There's a copy of that in the book called History of Dauphin County, Dauphin, Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. You read chapter 1, you will read that William Penn pointed out that he had found the stock of the 10 tribes. He pointed out their ancient Hebrewism, how their Hebrewism was actually pure and older than what was being taught in Europe and the Middle East at that time. And he
Wow.
goes at great length pointing out that they were here. And now the question is whether they had returned there or whether they were still there. That's the conversation we open up now. But that's 350 years ago. Our forefathers screaming out, hold on a second, maybe we should take a different approach because these people are special. Some of this land is sacred. And you know that is not good for business. When he wrote that letter, they destroyed him. They threw him in prison back in Europe, and he never got out.
Go
So,
ahead. Tell me
okay.
about the balance of nature, the balance cooperation with nature that this civilization had in opposition to kind of how it is now, where it's very exploitive of nature.
Yes. And I'd offer that in that way, that is one of the ways they're more advanced than us. One of the great examples that we're going to share soon is there is a specific city that is by a registered major national burial ground called Island Field that's dated beyond 10,000 years, so beyond biblical times itself with the archaeologists. And when you look at this neighboring city that we've developed for 400 years, and then when I zoom out and you see the whole picture, we're using Illustrator to highlight some colors and trace the area so you know what's what. And when you see the size of the drainage of this ancient city that dwarfs what we've built in 400 years, even where the president lives in Rehoboth, they're still barely stretching out into how big it was. And so they're proving to us just right here on the East Coast of North America that because they wanted less, and that's because they needed less. They were more in balance with the earth. They were providing their own food for themselves. The canals that you see from the sky, that's all aquaculture. They were lined with oysters to cleanse the water. That is billions of square feet of nesting area for birds and fish and shellfish and turtles. And so that's why the Eastern Seaboard's fishery was so great at one point. And do you know why it's weakening? Because the genetic diversity that exists that are trapped in these canals that needs to be left out, that we dredge all on top of so that wealthier people can live on the shore, it is actually stopping up the transfer and use of the footprint of how advanced and balanced with nature they were is actually one of the key elements of why I'm doing this. It's a giant ecological program to save a bunch of things. And it shows that they had far more people living because we're going to be able to show you in that area the thousands of shell midden or refuse mounds that's necessary to have civilization. If you
You're
call a
talking over
university,
100 million people when in comparison to what was reported, which was like what, 800,000 to a million or something?
oh well, yeah, when 1492, roughly around 1500,
Mm-hmm.
population of people, of indigenous people, we'll say. We don't want to get in any arguments with anybody. Indigenous people in North America, if you call this as accepted mainstream science, we're not being out on the limb here.
Mm-hmm.
100 million people. Then by the 1800s, the middle 1800s. So William Penn even writes a letter in between and says, hold on here. Let's slow up at what we're doing here. And still it continues because by the 1800s, most universities fall somewhere between 3 million and 600,000. Most of the universities and academic institutions and government institutions would tell you the lowest number, that by 1850s, that number had been reduced to 600,000. So this ancient indigenous civilization, when you talk about Native Americans, well, remember, the people that were more out west, they came, and that is what happened to the people of the East Coast. 97 to 99% of them were unlived within 300 years. And so we live on their land, and that is, the essence of it right there. Their civilization was bigger for sure, and we're just now starting to grow out into those areas.
Right, right. Well, let's get back to evidence again, hard evidence of these things. In addition to being able to, I've always talked about you can sort of use your intuitive nature to read, to research, to go through Google Maps, to look at sites, then to physically get up and go visit those sites because the story there and what you can find based in the written evidence that we can find on sites like the Library of Congress
Yeah.
is that there was a people here, but then they came in and they clear cut the forests and they dammed up the water and they flooded the cities, right? Talk about what that looked like, the railroad barons, the gold mining, all of the
Yes.
exploitation. There's a written record of this as well. And you can see who the nefarious characters are.
Oh, yes. And it starts with the railroad so that your followers and researchers understand we're always going to be giving you truth. And I don't want you to accept truth from mouth. You're supposed to go verify these things. So you come with us in confidence. You do your own work on your end. And that way you feel as a glass that is full with knowledge as well, not just receiving it. But for example, in West Harrisburg, which is the capital of one of the largest states in the country in Pennsylvania, when the railroad was going through there, we have documentation, actual written evidence of them going through, finding caves that had what they called creation level art all over the inside, and that's what they called it. And they detonated these caves long before the word archaeology even existed. So that's the archaeology system that was built in America. We teach, if you go read Thomas Jefferson's own website, his own people tell you it was built for class separation. It was built into control and all these other things to start separating and hiding things. And so, yeah, it just seems as if history has made a choice that right now these pieces of history still exist in literature. They're still there. The evidence is there when the industrialization, like the railroads, came through and destroyed things before we even had science to tell us what it was. And then every nuclear plant, every major electrical plant, the industrial footprint of the Northeast is put on top of, like Crane Hook is another one in Delaware. They built a giant landfill right on top of that site. And that's one thing I hope that you're going to get out, that these sites that we found are still safe. You see, before they're covered up, before they're a mystery like these things in Egypt. That's why we need your help because the artifacts are present. We're not just somebody speculating. We have the literary evidence, it's 10 years' work, all of the permit information, everything to show you. They build dams right on top of civilization areas on purpose. And that was Dr. Hay from the Smithsonian signing these kind of permits. So, right from the highest levels, they knew and understood they had better keep where we really live and what we live on top of out of the public eye if they can.
Absolutely. And you can see the evidence of why that would be because of what they've done to these sites. So I know everybody that's watching has a site come to mind. This is something that I just know. Everyone has like you said, this was a place you used to go and cry after the loss of your mother. Places that we were always sort of drawn to in nature. We're talking about literally thousands of sites from, you said, Newfoundland all the way down to the Keys, the
Yeah.
whole Gulf Coast.
Yeah, North America, even the Smithsonian, before they realized it, had a bunch of people working up there, and I have their documents that up in Labrador, Canada, right up there is when on the continent you really see the same footprint, and it goes all the way down to Florida. And based on, in other words, instead of trying to make history based on hundreds of years, this is over epochs. That's how ancient it is. It's before and after ice ages. And so certain people living north back then, because the climate was better. The icebergs came all the way down to Pennsylvania, Delaware line. And so that's why this area I think is very important, because it is the northernmost non-glaciated peninsula in North America. So if you were going to live on a defensible peninsula, Delmarva Peninsula is, and it happens to be sitting on a meteor site too. That's the largest meteor basin in the country, the Chesapeake Bay. So the significance of why people would live somewhere, you see there's more logic to it than we might think.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about the technology really quick that we are hypothesizing that this ancient civilization that was here used? This is a technology that has left behind clues for us. Talk a little bit more about that. I think this has a lot to do too with the mineral components in certain areas. We talk about the earth grid, we talk about the balance with the ionosphere and how it interacts with the ether. Talk about how this civilization had use of that technology.
Yeah, they definitely had a greater, and so that the public understands, we have thousands of their artifacts. Most of them are tools, but most of their tools were also ceremonial fetishes for them. So it goes to show you they were very spiritual people. The serpent itself, that is actually a hide smoother. On the backside is a really smooth spot. It's made for pushing the brains into the hide to make them tender. That was the ancient way of North America. So see, they're tools, but you see how they carried their symbols with them, just like us, our kids. They have Pokemon, these little trinkets. They were idolaters, just like us. And these different, that's how they leave behind their belief system to us. So I just want you to understand that's what we're doing, is interpreting their belief system based on images that they left behind. They were intelligent enough to leave way markers. Some of these stones, if you set them to certain directions, cardinal directions, at sunset and sundown, and sunrise, you see different images. They have more than one stone that when you put it, because these are also standing stones. We'll teach you more about the Onayutahaga, the standing stones people of North America, and that they worked in this region. And some of these, when you put them up on their feet, the way they stand up, we've got pictures of where you'll see they're napped down on tiny little feet. And when you mark those feet are constellations. Some of the more important ones, like Sirius A, Sirius B, how do they have constellations napped into their stones that we're just now figuring how to see with our modern telescopes? Well, they knew it was there before. And so the spiritual nature, the animal gratitude, you can see them reflect that in the animals that they're wearing on their heads, by the way. This should be the
Mm-hmm.
origin of humans wearing animal heads in ceremony. And they actually carve those things into stone. And so once you're around them and you take the physical nature of the stone, that it's magnetic, that it's piezoelectric, that it is a memory chip, the exact construction of ours, except for much purer, folks. It's much purer. And they found a way to pick it with a living battery inside of it so that it never runs out like our cell phones or laptops would. So, yes, I truly believe.
Wireless free energy is what that is.
Oh, yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
and of course that makes so much sense. We talk about the logic of this argument here, because of course they would want to cover that up. That does not serve capitalism in the slightest, and that's why the research that you're doing, I just want to thank you for all of the hard work and just pushing back against the system to try to expose this truth is so important. because it's an exploitive system that is basically responsible. This hidden history, the hiding of it is what is the motive and what has caused all of the problems that we see in a modern day civilization today. So Charles, tell us really quick, for those that are really into the story, they want to see all the work that you've done, they want to research more, where's all the places that they can find you? What are the things they need to be reading and researching and looking at?
Well, for right now, I go live on TikTok and I share videos on TikTok that have a lot of the book titles and things in there that can get you started. And that's at Human Origins Revealed. On YouTube, we're starting to put some information on there so that we can use a wider format, a 16:9 format, more like a television show for your bigger screens, and do more full episodes where you see an artifact, you hear its report, and that way it kind of helps get the truth across in a short period of time. And we're going to obviously work with you in some way to figure out which best way it is to expose ourselves to X. And
Yeah.
for now, our website, www.protectislandfield.com, that is the name of the one site that we are working on land back issues with the 5
Right.
federally recognized Lenape tribes, and with ourselves to save it so that the site is protected.
Absolutely. And then one final question. What's been the opposition that you've faced with the research that you've done when you've brought these artifacts to academics? Like what's the response that you get?
Well, different now. When I first started doing this, it's what most of you get. Oh, that's not worked, or that's natural. And because I was diligent, this was really kind of a partnership thing between I lost both my parents, I gave away my estate, and I was really searching. And so I was more diligent, I think, than the average person. That's about it. That once I figured out that they had to verify their artifacts in mineralogy as well, figured out the best laboratory in the country. The laboratory that verified our artifacts is the laboratory that discovered where Roman sword technology came from. So they don't mess around. They did the actual dig in Mongolia. They have access to a collider in China. We have level 5 reports for everything that we do. And so once I got that, and then walked in and sat down with the state of Delaware, showed them an artifact with a report, then it's totally different. They treat you like one of them. That's when I decided I would wear the title of avocational archaeologist, because now the lab said I deserved that respect, and could walk into these places now. In the state of Pennsylvania, they agree with me. They know that the Lenape have been in Pennsylvania for 12,000 years. So when I met the resistance was at the beginning, because just like everyone else, and that's why I hope through you and other people to share these fundamentals that you can use yourself to go out and verify your artifact, give you access to the laboratories that I don't own, I don't make a dime.
Yeah.
But that way, when you think you found something, you go out there and pursue that truth to the end.
That's awesome. Pursue that truth to the end. Thank you, Charles, again, so much for being with us. I really appreciate you being a part of Seeds of Awakening. This is such a game changer in terms of pulling everything together. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, I'm grateful for your time.